Hello everyone, this is Chris with Life on Bitcoin and welcome to part 2 of our 4-part series on buying Bitcoin. This is part of the Bitcoin Basics series that we're doing, and this is aimed at people who are just getting started with Bitcoin and are at the point where they understand a little bit about Bitcoin and they're ready to buy Bitcoin for the very first time. So we've got a presentation covering this topic today, which is centralized exchanges. We're going to explain what a centralized exchange is, some of the benefits of utilizing a centralized exchange, some of the risks associated with utilizing a centralized exchange, some tips, some guidance, tips, guidance, tricks. I don't know if there's any tricks, but some tips and tricks for centralized exchanges, and cover a little bit of the list that I've compiled as part of the resources, which is on the Life on BTC blog, and then some parting thoughts. So we've got a little presentation. Let's jump into it. All right, part 2, centralized exchanges. And here we go. So first and foremost, I think it's important to understand when I say a centralized exchange, what does that mean? What is a centralized exchange? Really, it's just a marketplace where buyers and sellers are together on a platform and they have the ability to buy or sell Bitcoin for fiat. And that could be in US dollars, that could be in euro. But a central authority has created that platform. They're setting up the exchange. They've gone out and got the licenses in whatever jurisdiction that they're operating out of, and they are providing that service to users who come on board to sign up for and utilize that service. So that's what it means by centralized exchange. A centralized exchange is almost in every case regulated by the jurisdiction that they're operating out of, and a centralized exchange usually has restrictions as to who can utilize their service based upon those regulations, and they determine the fees, they determine the practices that they're going to use around the wallet, their policies, their services, all that kind of stuff. So it's all centralized by them, and it's all determined by the people who are running the platform. This would be in the United States, for example. This would be like Coinbase. Outside the United States, you might be familiar with like Binance or something like that. So that's what a centralized exchange is. Some of the benefits of utilizing a centralized exchange or a CEX is it's easy, super fast, and super familiar. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's convenient. For anyone that's purchased something online, a centralized exchange is going to make sense. You either download their app or you go onto their website. You'll go through some sort of quick, typically sign-up process to create an account, and then you'll go through some other steps that we'll talk about as part of the risk slide to be able to utilize that account to go ahead and buy Bitcoin. And buying, the process is, how much do you want to buy, and how much in fiat are you going to utilize to buy? And then they'll tell you how much the equivalent of that is in Bitcoin, and you'll click a couple of buttons and then you'll be done. You'll have bought Bitcoin. You'll wait for the transaction, of course, to be confirmed, and in some cases, in some exchanges, they make it appear that it happened instantaneously, and we'll also talk about that as part of the risks and how they're able to do so. But yeah, they get rid of all the complexity. They make it easy for you. And they act as that kind of third-party intermediary, which is part of the reason we get into Bitcoin in the first place, is to get rid of that third-party intermediary. That said, for a lot of people, I think centralized exchanges will make the most sense for them as part of the beginning of their journey. So those are the benefits. Also, I want to call out that there are exchanges out there that specialize or focus on Bitcoin only, and those are going to be more in alignment with the principles of Bitcoin. Typically, those exchanges, although they are helping you in that initial process, they're really encouraging you to take custody of your Bitcoin yourself and get it off the exchange. So that's pretty interesting. So let's talk about some of the risks associated with utilizing a centralized exchange. And as I was just alluding to, one of the biggest is, of course, centralized exchanges are custodial, meaning that they hold the wallet and they hold the keys to the wallet where your Bitcoins are stored. And that means that they have sole control of that Bitcoin. Of course, on the user interface, it looks like you can send it and you can do whatever you want with it, or you can sell it, but really they actually have the physical control, or digital physical control, the authority to access those Bitcoin. You don't, because you don't hold the keys. In a self-custodial scenario, you actually hold your private keys and you're the only one who decides when to send or transact your Bitcoin. That's the big difference. The other risk associated with a centralized exchange is that they're going to require KYC, or Know Your Customer. It's a regulation that is part of the AML, or the money laundering laws that exist in most jurisdictions around the world, pretty much anywhere that deals with any sort of typical bank and the existing fiat infrastructure. And Know Your Customer means that you're going to have to, even though it would be really easy to sign up for that account in the first place, you're going to have to verify your identity before you can really do anything, before you can buy Bitcoin. And you're going to have to do so by providing some sort of combination of your name, your telephone number, your address, some sort of identity document. That could be your passport or your driver's license. In some cases, you might have to provide a utility bill to prove that that actually is your address and you live there. And I've even heard of cases where you have to get on a video call with the exchange themselves, and someone there verifies that you're a real human being and you're not using AI or something else to fool them and skirt around those laws. What comes with KYC, outside of the fact that it feels very invasive, and it's you're getting permission to do what you want to do, and Bitcoin is permissionless and you shouldn't have to do that. But what comes with that is censorship, tracking, the ability to confiscate your Bitcoin because they know that you have that Bitcoin, tax reporting, which you may or may not believe you should or really are subject to, but they're going to associate they know what you purchased. They know what you use to purchase it. They know how much Bitcoin you have. And if you send it off the exchange, they know where you sent it to, so the next address. And because the Bitcoin time chain is transparent in that regard, meaning that you can trace any transaction from its origin to its endpoint, you don't have any privacy associated with those Bitcoins, and never will. The only way that you can get your privacy back is to actually bring those Bitcoins back to the exchange, sell them on the exchange, then take that fiat money and purchase additional or replacement Bitcoin in some other manner that guarantees your privacy. So that's really one of the biggest problems with a centralized exchange. Of course, there are kind of some exceptions to this rule. There are some exchanges that allow you to buy up to a certain amount without going through a identity verification process. That said, they do still have some information. They know that you that a certain bank account, which they can determine who owns that bank account, purchased a certain amount of Bitcoin, and that is associated with a specific wallet address. So it's not, you don't give up as much privacy, but there is still some risk associated with that, depending on how long they keep those records. The other, and it's not just the privacy, the other aspect of that you have to consider is that if the exchange is hacked, not only could they leak your data, so the data sovereignty aspect of it, but they could potentially steal the Bitcoin that exists on the exchange, as most famously happened with Mt. Gox. And because you didn't control it, you've now lost your Bitcoin. So those are some of the big risks around utilizing a centralized exchange. Excuse me. I need to drink water. So here are some tips. If you're going to use a centralized exchange, number one, do your own research. I have a list I put together of a bunch of different centralized exchanges. I've separated it into Bitcoin focused only centralized exchanges and to cryptocurrency exchanges. You can utilize that list as a starting point, but you still want to go out and do your own research. Anything that's on there, things can change. Of course, I believe I'm in my integrity when I put the list together, but you want to validate that for yourself. You don't want to trust someone else. You want to verify that that information is true and accurate, and then you want to pick the exchange that makes the most sense for you to use. Just because I used one, or maybe I have an affiliate link, which I have a couple in there, and if you want to support my work and use those, that's great. And if you don't, that's great too. But just because that exists doesn't mean that that is the right exchange for you, or that you'll have the same experience that I had. So you need to not trust, you need to verify. That's an axiom really of the Bitcoin principles, is don't trust, verify. Also, I'd really encourage you to go to one of the Bitcoin only exchanges. You're gonna have a better experience as a Bitcoiner there, typically because they understand what attracts people to Bitcoin in the first place, the Bitcoin principles. They keep those really as part of their ethos, as at least that's been my experience. And they're probably going to encourage you to move your Bitcoin off of the exchange into self-custody if you have a good understanding. They're going to provide resources to help you learn how to do that. They're going to do a really good job of onboarding you onto Bitcoin, much more so than an exchange that's focused on cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin's not crypto. Crypto is noise. You want a strong signal, you go to a Bitcoin only exchange. So also, as I've mentioned a few times, move your coins, get them off the exchange. We've already seen through the last cycle in Bitcoin where exchanges went bankrupt, or they got hacked, or they misused customers' funds and people lost their savings. There's no reason for that. If you have any amount of Bitcoin that you care about losing, move it off the exchange and bring it into self-custody. And then finally, and this is kind of an advanced topic that won't necessarily make a lot of sense now, but we'll cover this as part of Bitcoin basics in the future. There's something called an unspent transaction output, or a UTXO. This is the leftover change when you spend or send and receive Bitcoin. So just like if you had a $20 bill in your pocket and you owed someone $5, you now get a 10 and maybe 5 ones back. Bitcoin operates in the same way. And if those UTXOs are very small, there's a possibility that in the future, in fact, it's really kind of a probability that in the future, the transaction fees might be higher than the amount of Bitcoin that you're trying to, that dollar or that 50 cents that you're trying to take out of your wallet and send somewhere. So if you're dollar cost averaging, buying Bitcoin on a regular basis at one of these exchanges, wait until you have a reasonable amount, maybe the equivalent of $100 US or 100 euro or something like that, before you move it off to your wallet, so that those UTXOs will be large enough that they won't be at risk of losing them in the future due to their unspendability. So that's just some of the tips that I would keep in mind, and those are things to think about if you're going to utilize a centralized exchange to buy Bitcoin for the first time. So before we go into some of the closing thoughts, I wanted to give you an idea of what that list looks like that I'll be providing. And I'm going to throw that up now. Hopefully you can see that, and I did it right. And so this is a list of exchanges and the various jurisdictions that they operate in. It's pretty self-explanatory, but just so you understand it, it's going to delineate whether the exchange is a Bitcoin-only exchange or a crypto exchange. We're going to talk about custody, whether you have the ability to send, as part of that purchase, your Bitcoin directly to a off-exchange self-hosted or self-custodial wallet. Some services do offer that, which is great. What their KYC process looks like. Typically, they're all going to be strict, but there are some that are marked as partial. And what that means is they may allow you to purchase a certain amount of Bitcoin or a certain fiat amount without providing full verification. Of course, they do still know your bank account, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to call out the different fees. Some have bigger fees than others, but typically it's 2.5 down to 0%. The region that they operate in, and some of my notes and an affiliate link if I do have one. As I said earlier, that doesn't mean that that's an endorsement necessarily of that service. It just means that I've used the service and I had a good experience, and so I'm happy to provide that link. And if you use it, and it's a way to support the work that I'm doing. So let's wrap up with a couple of closing thoughts on utilizing exchange to buy Bitcoin. For most of us, the reason we get into Bitcoin in the first place is not just because we heard that it was worth a lot of money or that it was rising in value, but because we were attracted to the principles of Bitcoin. The idea that there was this peer-to-peer electronic cash system that doesn't require a third-party intermediary, that's trustless, that's borderless, that's permissionless. That's why we want to move towards this asset. Of course, there are those who want to move to the hardest form of money, and Bitcoin is deflationary. Bitcoin has a set amount of supply at 21 million and is becoming more and more valuable over time because of that being built into the protocol, and that's attracted people as well. Those two things combined together mean that you want to start your journey on the best foot possible, and a centralized exchange isn't necessarily that. It doesn't mean that it's bad. I certainly started my journey that way. I bought my first Bitcoin through Coinbase, as I mentioned earlier, and maybe you will too. But understand that that has repercussions on your privacy, that has repercussions on your ability to transact that Bitcoin in the future potentially, and that Bitcoin is trackable, really is what it comes down to. So think about that. Next week, we're going to cover decentralized exchanges, and then we're going to cover after that in the final part 4 of the series, Bitcoin ATMs. I hope you found the information useful. Please do take a look at that list and the resources, the updated resources blog post on Life on BTC on Substack. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much, everyone.